Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
In the inpatient department of the high-end hospital, Coralie removed the gauze and checked her forehead. Great relief suffused her when she found no scar marring her countenance. She waited for Jonathan to arrive. I more or less know his weakness. As long as I take the initiative, I'll be able to attain my goal sooner or later. A faint smile curved her lips. All of a sudden, her phone rang. Upon seeing that it was a call from Jonathan, she reckoned that he had probably arrived at the hospital. She planned to play some trick later to draw closer to the man. As soon as she had answered the phone, Jonathan's voice drifted out. I'm really sorry, but I don't think I can go over to pick you up from the hospital today, Ms. Crawford. If you truly can't find anyone to help you out, can you arrange to be discharged tomorrow? Coralie was caught off guard, never having expected the man to abruptly go back on his word. Her temper instantly spiked, and she snapped with displeasure written all over her face. In that case, forget it. I can get discharged from the hospital by myself. After saying that, she furiously hung up the phone. She felt sure that Jonathan would undoubtedly call her back to explain, since she had pulled the same tactic on many men, and it had worked every time. Alas, her phone remained silent even after she waited for a long time, which was about 3 minutes. Jonathan did not call her back. In a flash, she realized that her brother's appearance yesterday was a grave mistake, for Jonathan's attitude toward her had changed in a split second. Ultimately, she could only grit her teeth and do the packing herself. At the same time, Jonathan was driving Madeline to the hospital. Madeline initially wanted to tell him that she was in pain because she was on her menstruation. At his solemn expression, however, she inexplicably could not bring herself to turn him down. To her surprise, she even overheard Jonathan declining to pick Coralie up from the hospital. She could not help feeling gleeful inwardly. When we arrive at the hospital, have the doctor check you over properly and see what exactly is the matter. Are you still in pain right now? Madame Zander said that you've been overtaxing yourself recently. You've got to take good care of yourself. Many of the medicinal herbs I brought this time are suitable for you as a supplement. Jonathan urged at length. As Madeline nodded in acquiescence, her mind inexorably wandered. Ads by Pub Future. He's gentle despite his rough ways and attentive in his denseness, gradually showcasing increasingly more of his strong points. But does he really have no interest in a romantic relationship? Shortly after, they arrived at the hospital. To make the show believable, Madeline went to the obstetrics and gynecology department for a consultation and sought the doctor on duty out. Understandably, the doctor on duty suffered a fright. Who? Isn't Dr. Zander supposed to be on leave today? Is she here for a spot check? Fortunately, he was working diligently in the first place. After he had diagnosed his patient, he asked her whether she was there to check on him or if she needed him to do something. Madeline frankly told him that her menstruation had been somewhat irregular lately and the pain had worsened, asking him to prescribe her some traditional medicine to restore balance in her body before leaving the examination room. How was it? What did the doctor on duty say? Jonathan suddenly realized that he should not have asked that. They were at the obstetrics and gynecology department, so it was exceedingly dumb of him to ask such a question since it was something private when it came to the specific problem. As such, she did not have to tell him anything. Everything's fine. I merely need to take some medicine to restore balance in my body. Out of the blue, Madeline felt that coming to the obstetrics and gynecology department for consultation was also a mistake. If I don't explain things to him, won't he misunderstand that I've got some gynecological condition? Oh God, this is simply too embarrassing. That's great. Is it traditional medicinal herbs? If so, I'll decoct them for you when we get back, Jonathan offered. He was an expert in that, as the Queen family had always been one of the biggest suppliers of traditional medicinal herbs in Chronicles. Sure. Let's go back now, then. Madeline no longer cared about the details anymore. She seemingly did not mind doing anything at all so long as she could have him spend more time with her. Coralie was really curious about what exactly Jonathan was doing that he went back on his word to pick her up. After leaving the hospital, she booked herself a room at a 5-star hotel. Then, she made a call. Trey, help me investigate Jonathan Queen of the Queen family and see what exactly he's doing. My brother had once asked you to keep tabs on him in the past. Trey Calnan was someone Sean personally trained in Horrington. He spearheaded a small team specializing in collecting information, very much efficient at his job. He had kept tabs on Lucian and Jonathan in the past and managed to obtain genuine information on them. Of course, it was also possible that both men could not be bothered to conceal their whereabouts. In no time, Trey came back to Coralie with the answer. I found that Jonathan Queen likely remained at Madeline Xander's house for a few hours and only left after lunch. The license plate matches. After reporting back habitually, Trey hung up the phone. Coralie was stunned for a long time before fury abruptly blazed to life within her. So, I lost to Madeline? Did she really seize advantage of the time while I was away from Horrington to take her relationship with Jonathan further at lightning speed? Countless wealthy heirs pursued me back in the north, but I could not muster the slightest interest in them all. After meeting an intriguing man like Jonathan, I've taken my relationship with him seriously. Never had I imagined that I'd lose to an inferior woman with no background whatsoever. Her blood boiled, and she was so incensed that she opened a bottle of wine and started downing it sullenly. In the evening, Roxanne listened as Madeline narrated the events that had happened that day. Deep within, she felt rather glad that Jonathan did not bother about Coralie but took care of her best friend instead, proving that the latter occupied a crucial position in the man's heart. Nevertheless, Madeline did not dare tell her about Jonathan having seen her unclothed in the morning. Roxanne again encouraged Madeline at length, urging her to be more proactive instead of being reserved and to cling to Jonathan tightly. The two of them then teased one another. It was not until the triplets had returned from school that Roxanne hung up the phone. Subsequently, she phoned her father, Grant, and arranged for him to meet the children at a park. Grant sounded incredibly emotional on the phone, thanking her fervently, but that put her slightly ill at ease. Lucian helped the triplets take their bags and books into the mansion. On the heels of that, he told them to change in preparation for meeting their maternal grandfather.
Granddad?
Why are we going to meet him, Daddy? Has Mommy agreed? Granddad never wanted us, no? I don't want to meet him. Archie and Benny's aversion was still as candid as ever. They understood many things and had never seen their maternal grandfather all these years, making it clear that the man did not care about them at all. Looking at her brothers, Estella followed their lead. Since Archie and Benny don't want to go, neither do I. Roxanne overheard the conversation and could only come over and explain things to them, pointing out that it was just a brief meeting that would not take long. Elias likewise coaxed, if you all don't like it, just have a look at him from afar. This is basic courtesy. At long last, the triplets relented. With Lucian driving, they all headed to the park. Right then, Grant was busy packing everything up at a dilapidated residential area in the suburbs. He had bought a lot of branded children's clothes and even had 3 emerald pendants made for the triplets. Behind him, Winnie wore a chagrined expression. Why did you spend so much money? Those 3 brats might not necessarily acknowledge you. Your plan this time had better succeed. Otherwise, you'll be getting it from me. How dare you ask me to play along with you, even getting a divorce with me for real? What do you know? I only did so to show her in a show of sincerity. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to approach Roxanne at all. Aren't I doing all this for the sake of our future? If you've got nothing to do, Winnie, take some money and look for that son of yours. Wrath lined Grant's features, and he knew all too well that she had no control over him at the moment. After all, the divorce certificate was real, though the divorce itself was bogus. He had finally convinced the woman to play along with him after much difficulty, and it was all for the sake of obtaining perpetual financial support from the heir of the Crawford family. At the park, Roxanne and Lucian set up a simple campsite by pitching a tent and spreading out a waterproof mat. Once they were done, Lucian cooked a meal with the kids using some simple utensils. The sight warmed Roxanne's heart. How thoughtful of Lucian. By doing this, the kids won't resent him so much. With that, she extended a hand to help. Once the food was ready, she held up a plate for the children to try. Meanwhile, Grant arrived at the appointed time. Dressed shabbily, he walked with an unsteady gait. He had a bag in his hand that contained newly bought branded clothes and 3 emerald pendants. Standing at a distance, he quietly watched the children enjoy their parents' company. A complicated look flashed across his eyes in the midst of doing so. I have no choice but to comply with Mr. Crawford's demand. The $5 million I previously had was taken away by the creditors. I have no way of paying it back, and I don't want to stay poor forever. Grant steeled his resolve and gave Roxanne a call. In reality, Lucian had already noticed Grant's presence and would look in the latter's direction intermittently. He wanted to determine if Grant's concern for the children was sincere. If he approaches the children quickly the moment he sees them, he probably wants to ingratiate himself with them and doesn't really miss them. Upon receiving the call, Roxanne looked around before finally spotting her father. Grant's hunch seemed to have worsened from the last time, cutting a pitiful and desolate-looking figure. "Lucian, Grant is here. What do you plan to do?" Roxanne inquired. Lucian responded calmly, "Don't worry. Let him come over and see the children. He does deserve it as their granddad." Thereafter, Grant approached them meekly upon receiving permission to do so. A faint smile broke out across his weathered face, while gentleness settled into his eyes. Even though he knew that he was acting according to plan, the sight of his energetic grandchildren triggered a sudden sense of warmth within him. Mr. Crawford promised that all I needed to do was to get close to them and feed him information. He probably won't get me to harm them. Roxanne, is this Archie? Is he Benny? Both of them look so alike that I can't tell them apart. While mumbling, Grant's gaze fell upon Estella, and he broadened his smile. Essie, don't be shy. I'm your granddad." At that moment, Archie and Benny maintained an indifferent look in their eyes, a testament to their taking after Lucian. As for Estella, she blinked curiously before turning to ask Roxanne, "Mommy, is he our granddad?" After Roxanne and Lucian nodded in unison, Estella gave Grant a polite nod. Nice to meet you, Granddad." Estella's warmth took Grant by surprise. He hadn't expected her to acknowledge him as her grandfather on such short notice. Meanwhile, Archie and Benny exchanged glances before joining in to greet him, "Hello, Granddad." Nonetheless, their expression remained just as distant. As they were more sensible than Estella, they were aware of how badly Grant had treated Roxanne. After acknowledging their greeting with a hum, Grant frantically brought out the new clothes and 3 exquisite-looking boxes. Roxanne, Mr. Farwell, I've bought some outfits for the children. It should fit them perfectly. Also, here are 3 emerald pendants. They aren't expensive, so it's not necessary to wear them. I just wanted to get them something to remember me by. When she saw the approving look Lucian gave her, Roxanne walked over to accept the gifts. Heartened by her gesture, Grant broke into a slight smile. He subsequently gave the children a nod. Kids, thank you. I'm really happy to be able to see all of you. Well, I think I should go now. You guys continue to have fun." As Grant departed, the 3 children stared at his leaving silhouette. The silence was quickly broken by Estella's question. Daddy, Mommy, isn't Granddad pitiful?" Archie and Benny corrected their sister immediately. No, Essie. Granddad isn't pitiful because he has always treated Mommy badly. Estella responded with a thoughtful nod. Lucian and Roxanne didn't comment on the children's conversation, for they didn't feel the need to lecture them or shape their minds about the matter. Instead, they respected the children's freedom to follow their gut feeling. With that, the The family continued playing camping games before leaving the park when darkness fell. When Grant returned to his suffocatingly small apartment in a dilapidated neighborhood, he found Winnie playing on her phone and that she hadn't cooked dinner. The sight triggered within him a sense of hatred for her. His temper flared immediately. What's the matter with you? Why didn't you prepare dinner? Do you think you're some rich housewife?" His words elicited a vicious glower from Winnie. Why should I? I'm no longer your wife. Despite having 5 million in your hands, you didn't even save a single penny. How thick is that skull of yours? And what's this about me being a rich housewife? You're well aware of how I suffered together with you all these years. Now that your daughter is doing well, it's really ironic that you have fallen into such pathetic circumstances. Rage swelled within Grant after he was given a good round of tongue-lashing by Winnie. "Why are you blaming me? Roxanne wouldn't have severed ties with us if you hadn't bullied her back then. Since you're in so much suffering, you're more than welcome to leave." "Damn it, Grant. How can you kick me out after we're divorced? Do you even have a conscience? Let me tell you, your son and daughter are on their way here right now, and they won't forgive you once they learn that you have divorced me. How dare you still want me to cook for you?" The more Winnie thought about it, the more enraged she became. She had assumed that she would live a life of luxury after getting married to Grant. Little did she imagine that he would turn out to be a coward who was saddled with debt. In a fit of rage, Winnie grabbed her phone, put on a pair of new high heels, and stormed into her room to start packing. Fine. Ellie. Go ahead and have your father-daughter reunion with Roxanne. You can get some money and enjoy yourself with it." Winnie's rants became increasingly aggressive. Cowed into silence, Grant stopped her from leaving in the end. "I told you that this is part of the plan. I have to make myself look pitiful, as this is what Mr. Crawford wants. That's how I'm going to get close to Roxanne. When I strike it rich after this, you'll be able to live the life you dream of, so please don't leave. I'll go get a personal loan for you to buy a new phone and some clothes, all right?" Winnie's anger gradually dissipated after being assuaged by Grant. At that moment, their old and broken gate let out a piercing screech, heralding the arrival of a female figure. She wore a frosty expression on her face and was dressed in white office wear as she walked right up to Grant and Winnie. The couple was briefly stunned before their eyes lit up in joy. Juliana, you're back. My precious daughter, you're finally back." Winnie scrutinized her daughter's outfit and quickly noticed the expensive necklace she was wearing. It looks like her life has taken a turn for the better. As for Grant, he quickly averted his gaze, worried that Juliana will ask about the divorce. "Dad, Mom, have you seen Roxanne? That batch seems to have done well for herself. Yet, she didn't invite both of you to her wedding." The anger on Juliana's face was unmistakable. Winnie nodded before relating what happened by twisting the facts further. While doing so, she mentioned Grant's visit to the children by accident. Juliana furrowed her brows intensely as she glared at her father. "Dad, what's the meaning of this? Have you no shame? She has severed ties with you, yet you ingratiate yourself with her? I don't care if you have an ulterior motive for doing so, but I'm going to make her pay for what she has done to Mom. Mom, get dressed quickly. I'm taking you to see someone distinguished." After railing at her father, Juliana lit up a cigarette and sat down impatiently to wait. Winnie was briefly stunned before she hurried off to do as she was told. For her daughter to refer to someone as distinguished, Winnie was certain that person was really important. Hence, she had to make sure she wouldn't embarrass the former. Throughout the entire episode, Grant was frowning as there was nowhere to vent his frustration. The reason was that his attempts to pay off his debts had caused Juliana to lose her rich boyfriend. In the end, she couldn't even find a job and had to leave the country in search of better prospects. All these years, Grant rarely interacted with his daughter. At most, he would get to chat a little when the latter was on the phone with Winnie. A short while later, Winnie emerged from her room looking rather presentable. Juliana threw her a quick glance, and upon approving of how Winnie looked, she led her mother downstairs and got into a Mercedes-Benz. The sight of the luxury car shocked Winnie, who knew it cost 700,000 to 800,000. Juliana, have you struck it rich? The moment she entered the car, Winnie couldn't help running her fingers across its opulent interior. Juliana pondered a moment before replying, I met a rich man in Girton. Although he's a little old, he likes me a lot and is willing to splurge on me. Age isn't important. Wealth is what matters in this era. The excitement within Winnie was stirred. With nothing further to add, Juliana drove both of them to a 5-star hotel. Upon entering the room, she took a shower and changed into a relatively sexy outfit. Mom, listen up. Mr. Ramos will arrive later to talk to you about our wedding. Remember to put on some airs and demand a dowry of at least 10 million and 2 houses. A year and a half after our wedding, I'll start causing problems to get him to divorce me. As for the money, you have to keep it safe on my behalf. If not for Roxanne's success, Juliana would have been satisfied with what she had. A tycoon from Girton was rich enough to give her a life of luxury forever. However, when she was being outdone by Roxanne, whom she used to trample upon, she felt the need to use the rich tycoon as a stepping stone to help her achieve her ambition. Overwhelmed with elation upon hearing the instructions, Winnie railed at Grant out of the blue. You and Dad got divorced? Juliana was infuriated upon learning the truth. Yes, we did. Isn't it great? There's no need for you to care about him anymore. Going forward, both of us and your brother will be one family. After all, Grant is nothing but a fool. Winnie was filled with a sense of release as she no longer needed to depend on Grant. Fine. Divorce seems to be for the best. I never wanted someone like that for a father anyway. He's nothing but a piece of trash. Juliana sneered with narrowed eyes, for she had hated Grant for a very long time. I didn't expect him to ingratiate himself with Roxanne. Has he forgotten how badly he treated Roxanne's mother back then? Thereafter, mother and daughter continued scheming as they waited patiently for David Ramos, the tycoon from Girton. Meanwhile, Grant received a call from Jonas, who wanted to meet up. Grant hurried to a Chilean restaurant to see the latter and reported his interaction with Roxanne and Lucian in detail. An insidious glint flashed across Jonas' eyes as spoke. Good. You did well. Considering how broke you have been recently, here's $1 million. As for your creditors, don't give them anything anymore. Also, get yourself freshened up to improve your image. If anyone asks about the money, just tell them someone has given you a break by investing in you. The next day, Lucian accompanied Roxanne to the cemetery where she paid respects to her mother. As it suddenly began to drizzle, the cemetery was quickly covered in mist. With an umbrella in his hand, Lucian made sure Roxanne was fully covered even if it meant that half of his body would get wet. Roxanne looked at the tombstone where a picture of her mother was embedded. It captured the first time she smiled vibrantly ever since she got seriously sick. She could still remember how she rushed back home from school back then and saw how neatly her mother was dressed when she returned from a photography studio. The beaming expression and the reluctance in her mother's eyes filled Roxanne with a sense of dread. True enough, her mother met her untimely end not long after that. Back then, Roxanne felt as if her world had collapsed. Her mind drew a blank, as the pillar of support in her life was now gone. She couldn't even recall how many days she went without food and water. In the end, she held a simple funeral for her together with Grant in a detached state of mind. Ever since the tragedy, Roxanne kept all her emotions to herself. Regardless of the problems she faced in life, she would quietly hide away and let her wounds heal by themselves. She also swore that she would never forgive Grant for his unconscionable deeds. Soon after her mother's death, Grant married Winnie and brought along Joseph and Juliana into her life. That was when all her troubles started. Back then, Lucian wasn't aware that he was the beacon of light in the darkness that engulfed Roxanne's life. He had become the very reason she continued to live on. After all, she was nothing but a love-struck lass. Therefore, When coincidence somehow delivered her to the Farwell family where she married Lucian, she couldn't be any happier. This was despite the fact that Lucian harbored no interest in her and only saw her as a lowly gold digger. However, fate worked in mysterious ways. In front of her mother's grave, Roxanne softly related Grant's latest situation. He has gotten what he deserves. Lucian waited quietly by the side until his wife was done. After helping her back to her feet, he knelt down in front of the grave and declared, "Mom, you can rest assured that I'll take good care of Roxanne and the kids. I'll never let anyone bully them ever again. So please bless us from wherever you are up there." At that moment, a sense of warmth enveloped Roxanne as she smiled at her mother's picture. Mom, we're going off now. I'll come with the kids the next time. They've finally done it, once a month as promised. Aren't they just filial to their granny?" Upon emerging from the cemetery, Roxanne no longer felt the sorrow of the past. Instead, there was a newfound sense of peace within her. "Lucian, do you trust Grant?" "I still don't trust him fully until now," asked Roxanne softly as she leaned against Lucian's shoulder inside the car. "My sentiments are exactly the same, but don't you worry. I won't allow him any opportunity to harm you or the children." Lucian put his arm around her and pulled her closer. Caden, who was in the driver's seat, kept his eyes on the road and made sure not to look. All of a sudden, Lucian answered a call from James. James said that Mr. and Mrs. Lon will drop by to visit the children tonight. They probably want to thank us for helping Mrs. Lon out the last time. From James' tone, it's likely that Mrs. Lon's condition has finally stabilized. While speaking, Lucian couldn't help admiring Roxanne for how decisively she resolved the matter the last time. That's wonderful. She has finally gotten over her problems. Mrs. Lon is such a kind person and resembles my mom a lot. The reason I managed to come up with that idea was that the situation reminded me of the past, making me feel as if there's something I can do for my mom. Thoughts of her mother began to fill Roxanne's mind. Jones and Yennefer brought plenty of gifts, which included vintage red wine preserved for 20 years from 4K, red Hibernia coffee beans that were extremely rare in the south, and expensive mushrooms harvested from the mountainous regions in Zendale. Roxanne had never seen most of the items given by the couple. It was said that one catty of the mushrooms cost tens of thousands. Roxanne was speechless as she listened to Sonia chatting with Yennefer. The gifts for this visit alone already cost almost $1 million. In front of Elias and Sonia, Yennefer continuously praised Roxanne. She waxed lyrical about her impressive medical skills, good looks, and ability to manage such a large corporation in addition to giving birth to 3 adorable children. It made Roxanne seem like such a rare gem of a wife. Sonia began feeling guilty and joined her in praising her daughter-in-law too. Jones and Elias exchanged pleasantries and expressed their deepest regret for not attending Lucian's wedding. After which, Elias pulled his old pal along with him to taste the red wine. Lucian and James leisurely sipped the various kinds of premium coffee on the second-floor balcony. The relationship between both families was pleasant and harmonious. Yennefer requested Roxanne to keep a lookout for any eligible young woman as James still had not found a wife. Roxanne pondered it over and decided that finding a woman good enough for James would be no easy task. She only had one close friend and was occupied with Jonathan. In fact, James was very well aware of that. I'm half joking, Roxanne. Just let me know if you ever come across someone you think might be suitable. Don't worry about it. Yennefer hurriedly clarified when she observed the troubled look on Roxanne's face. Roxanne nodded with a smile. I'll head to the kitchen to help prepare dinner. What? Does your mother-in-law still require you to cook?
Yennefer et Sonia.
Sonia was taken aback and hastily waved her hands. Of course not. Roxanne doesn't have to worry about that. There is a cook who has everything taken care of. She's merely thinking of whipping up several dishes as a treat since all of you are here. At that, she turned her gaze to Roxanne. My mom cooks mostly and often prepares soup for me. Her culinary skills these days are out of this world, and the truth is that I rarely cook." Roxanne inclined her head. Feeling relief that Roxanne had given her an out, Sonia beamed as she stood. Let me do it. I recently learned a new recipe for a soup that will go well with the mushrooms you bought." With that, she went to the kitchen. Yennefer gave Roxanne a sly smile behind Sonia's back. That's more like it. She used to complain to me about how inadequate you were. It's payback time." Roxanne had not expected Yennefer to react so vehemently to the injustice that he had suffered. Nevertheless, she still clarified, "That's all in the past. She treats me well now, and I'm certain we won't be at odds ever again." Yennefer nodded and discreetly admired Roxanne for being so magnanimous. There were rifts between other in-laws that could not be mended, even after a long time. The two families shared a sumptuous meal where wine flowed freely, and the atmosphere was full of merriment. Elias and Jones kept drinking non-stop until 9:30. Only then did James manage to get his father to go home. When Roxanne returned to her room after tucking the children to bed, Lucian was still reading. Lucian seemed to have thought of something as he marked the page of the book he was reading with a bookmark and closed it. There's something I need to tell you," Lucian said solemnly. Roxanne was putting on her moisturizer and nodded. Go on." "I investigated that the Crawford family in the north has assigned a man called Jonas to Horrington. He's been in contact with Grant and given him a large sum. I had a hunch that something was off when Grant kept trying to rub shoulders with us." Roxanne's heart fell as her pity for Grant was instantly wiped clean. She forced a smile that was tinged with bitterness. Well then, I guess his divorce from Winnie was just a ploy to garner sympathy. I wonder what his motivations are behind all these." Lucian nodded his head. Someone of his status would not care for someone like Grant. However, he was worried about Roxanne being upset over having such a father. Perhaps he's trying to get close to you now that you possess the wealth he desires." Lucian's words eliminated the need for further analysis of Grant's actions. Roxanne felt so disappointed that she resolved never to give her errant father another chance. 1 week later, Roxanne no longer frequented the research institute often, yet new medicine was being produced incessantly. The pricing set by the medical company meant that they were suffering losses every month. Flora Verba Group flourished under James' leadership, whereby its profits kept increasing until it was sufficient to cover the cost it took to research the medicine. The officials in the company had invited Roxanne to attend their commendation assembly multiple times and wished to crown her with several titles of honor, all of which she'd refused. Harvey had taught her not to pursue pointless fame. He could have generated a fortune, yet had chosen to remain a research professor. On that day, Roxanne led Peregrine and several higher-ups in the research institute to the hotel. They were preparing to meet with a medical company from Madroon to discuss patent rights. Although they suffered losses locally, granting their patent to an international company would help them generate more profit. The licensing fees will be calculated annually and will be around $1 billion for 10 years, after which the other party will be able to freely use the technology to produce all 6 types of medicine without limit. Linda gave a brief report to Roxanne while walking. Then she led the team and held her head high while walking confidently, attracting the attention of the hotel guests. The negotiation process was simple. She faced the snobbish representatives from the international company and insisted on the price she'd set no matter how hard they tried to negotiate with her. She finally had a say after many years of complying with their terms while using their patent. At last, they relented and agreed to Roxanne's price. Both parties signed the relevant documents swiftly. Peregrine lamented as they exited the hotel. I remember once, during my years at the research center in the north, I needed foreign technology to save a patient. The foreigners intentionally withheld it from me, and I had no choice but to watch helplessly as my patient's life drained away. All they care about is profit and have no respect for ethics." Roxanne nodded. She'd heard of similar incidents from her mentor as well. Roxanne, the truth is that many people overlook how brilliant and great a person you are. They may take you as a fool for having a non-profit-oriented research organization and medical company. However, you focus on the big picture. That is something most ordinary people can't comprehend. I'm extremely blessed to have a chance to work with you on such a meaningful initiative." Peregrine was overcome with emotion. The rest of the higher-ups in doing research and development echoed his sentiments as they nodded. They have never even dreamed of living a life of riches and glory when deciding to follow Roxanne as their leader. Yet Flora Verba Group had unexpectedly given them huge bonuses. Everyone present had gotten bonuses worth several million. I have to admit that I'm not as far-sighted as you think. I simply can't stand watching people in poverty suffer all their lives because of illness. That was indeed how she'd initially set her goal out to be. The drastic changes along the way had not been part of the plan. Suddenly, Roxanne caught sight of a face that was familiar yet unfamiliar to her while she was about to step out of the hotel entrance. Her smile froze. She'd bumped into the person she abhorred the most, Juliana. Clad in designer attire with a heavily made-up face, Juliana was adorned with gold and silver jewelry on her wrists, neck, and cars, exuding a sense of opulence and grandeur. Upon laying eyes on Roxanne, she was momentarily surprised. However, she quickly regained her composure and arched her eyebrows, smiling as she strode toward her sister. Isn't this my dear sister? It's such a coincidence. We haven't seen each other in 6 or 7 years, right?" Juliana's voice was always tinged with a sarcastic tone. Roxanne's expression was solemn, and her eyes reflected an indifferent attitude. She retorted immediately, "I heard you were a tour guide in Southeast Aploth. How did you suddenly fulfill your dream of becoming part of a wealthy family?" Peregrine and Linda, standing beside her, exchanged surprised glances as they tried to discern Juliana's identity. Why would she dare to act so arrogantly in front of Roxanne? Roxanne shot Linda a look. The latter immediately nodded and led Peregrine and the other executives away. How can I ever compare to you, Roxanne? I never imagined that Mr. Farwell of the Farwell Group would remarry you. You're the one who has achieved your dream by attaching yourself to a wealthy family. I'm nothing compared to you." Juliana's words were full of sarcasm. Without giving Roxanne a chance to retaliate, she continued, "Looks like having children brings many benefits. A responsible man like Mr. Farwell must have remarried you because of the children. I need to follow your lead, Roxanne." A grim look crept onto Roxanne's face. As there was no one else around, she felt no need to be courteous toward Juliana. "Juliana, you are still as sharp-tongued as ever. However, trying to provoke me with those worthless words is futile now. I guess you must be jealous. So what if I did marry into a wealthy family? I should remind you to check the current market value of Flora Verba Group. I'm now a wealthy woman in my own right. Do you understand?" Roxanne hissed. Her quick-witted remarks shattered Juliana's pretentious pride. Her face reddened with embarrassment as she clenched her teeth and gave Roxanne a cold glare. "You don't get too smug, Roxanne. Life is long and unpredictable, and no one knows what will happen in the future. But one thing is for sure, in the past, you were nothing but a punching bag for me." Juliana intended to flaunt her own superiority by bringing up past events, but to her surprise, Roxanne remembered everything vividly. She shot Juliana a ferocious glare and swiftly landed a hard slap on the woman's face. Juliana cradled her stinging cheek and seethed with anger. How dare you hit me?" As she shouted in anger, she lifted her hand, poised to strike back. However, she was caught off guard when suddenly, 4 to 5 figures surrounded Roxanne. Those were bodyguards that Lucian had arranged to always be by Roxanne's side. They were ordered to follow her in public areas and remain alert, especially when she came into contact with someone unfamiliar. The sight of Roxanne taking action naturally made them vigilant, and they immediately appeared by her side as quickly as possible to ensure her safety. As soon as Juliana raised her right hand, one of the bodyguards swiftly grabbed her wrist while the other pinned her to the ground, leaving her no time to react. Although their actions weren't too violent, they still caused a scene and attracted the attention of many onlookers. Juliana felt utterly embarrassed as she was held to the ground before she even had the time to react. She gritted her teeth and screamed, what do you guys want? Aren't you afraid that I'll call the police? Roxanne, I can't believe you. Roxanne towered over Juliana, looking down at her while saying in an icy tone, call the police? Sure, go ahead. Do you know how long I have been waiting for this day? After speaking, she bent over slightly and raised her hand to slap Juliana's other cheek. Roxanne knew that she was losing control of herself and that her actions might really cause her to end up getting arrested. However, she couldn't care less. All the resentment she had been enduring for years could only be vented through slaps. Juliana was in a daze after the second slap. By then, the hotel security noticed that something was wrong. He approached them, seemingly to stop Roxanne's actions. Just then, an onlooker called out, isn't that Roxanne, the young mistress of the Farwell family? Yes. I can't believe it's her. I didn't expect her to have such an aggressive side. Hey, stop filming. There must be a reason why Roxanne slapped the woman. I bet she's evil. Following a hushed exchange between the onlookers, the security personnel exchanged glances and hastened to obstruct the onlookers' view. They didn't dare to get too close, as the hostile aura emanating from the bodyguards was intimidating. Please calm down, Mrs. Farwell. There are a lot of people here, and we're worried that it may affect your reputation, urged the head of the security team. Although his reminder calmed her down a little, she continued fixing her cold gaze on Juliana. Over the years, Juliana had subjected her to various forms of bullying and humiliation. Juliana had also verbally abused Roxanne's mother, claiming the latter was unworthy of love and inferior to Winnie. As if that wasn't bad enough, when Roxanne's mother fell seriously ill, Juliana cursed her, wishing for her to die early. Furthermore, Juliana had also cut up several of Roxanne's favorite outfits and burned all the classroom notes that she had worked hard on for many years. To make matters worse, she had purposely spread baseless rumors about Roxanne having a miscarriage while they were still in school, resulting in Roxanne being regarded with disdain by her classmates. Juliana never stopped bullying Roxanne. In the end, she even threw away Roxanne's mother's belongings after the latter passed away. Back then, Roxanne did not have the chance to vent her anger. She could only suppress her hatred deep in her heart because Grant was biased toward Juliana. Winnie also contributed to the bullying, and Joseph even resorted to physical violence. Her entire family was devoid of conscience. Juliana struggled to get up from the ground while gnashing her teeth in anger, but she did not dare to act rashly again. Instead, she picked up her phone to seek help. Her husband, David Ramos, should be arriving soon. Roxanne remained calm as she waited to see how Juliana would fight back. Honey, where are you? Hurry up and come over. I was beaten by someone. Juliana started weeping as if she had just suffered grievances. Roxanne was curious about the identity of Juliana's honey. After witnessing the other woman's poor acting, unexpectedly, a few minutes later, Lucian arrived before David did. Linda could sense Roxanne's anger before she left. Rationalizing that Juliana was not to be underestimated, she decided to inform Lucian about what was happening. Upon seeing the hatred in Roxanne's eyes, he went straight to her and took her hand, expressing his concern for her well-being. Are you all right? Lucian asked gently as he examined if Roxanne was hurt. The woman shook her head and replied, Lucian, this is that amazing stepsister of mine, Juliana. Lucian's eyes narrowed into slits. It was clear that the mention of her name had triggered a deep-seated rage within him. Juliana trembled with fear as she had never been intimidated by someone's glare before. So, you are the one who bullied Roxanne for so many years? He asked in an interrogating tone. Scared out of her wits, Juliana came to the realization of how foolish she was to return to Horrington and challenge Roxanne.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.